Have you ever had a big decision to make and you just felt completely stuck? Like your brain is screaming one thing, a logical, well-reasoned argument, but deep down, your gut is whispering something else entirely. For the longest time, that was me. I felt totally disconnected from my own intuition, like I was navigating life with a broken compass. It led to endless second-guessing, analysis paralysis, and choices that just didn't feel right. I honestly started to wonder if this inner wisdom people talked about was just a myth. So I decided to try an experiment. For 1 week, I committed to 10 daily habits that are supposed to help you find that hidden wisdom. I had to know, could I actually recalibrate my internal guidance system? In this video, I'm sharing that entire journey with you. The good, the bad, the surprisingly tough, and the truly beautiful. I'll walk you through what happened and how this 1 week experiment completely changed my ability to trust my gut and make clear, confident decisions. This isn't just a list, it's the story of how I learned to listen to myself again. So, to give you some context, I was at a major crossroads, both personally and professionally. I had a huge life choice to make, one of those forks in the road that you know is going to define your next chapter. And I was frozen. My logical mind had a spreadsheet full of pros and cons, but my heart felt like a staticky radio station. I was just desperate for clarity. That desperation is what kicked off this whole experiment. I started researching practices that sages, scientists, and spiritual teachers have recommended for centuries to connect with that inner knowing. I pulled together 10 habits that seemed both powerful and, most importantly, actually doable every day. The rules were simple. Commit to all 10 every single day for 7 days. No excuses. I was skeptical, I'll be honest. How much can really change in a week? But I was also hopeful. I decided to document everything, how I felt, the challenges, any subtle shifts I noticed. My goal wasn't just to check off a to-do list, but to see if these practices could build a bridge back to my own intuition. So, let's get into the 10 habits and what I found out. The very first habit started the moment I woke up. Before my feet hit the floor, before checking my phone, before my analytical mind could fully boot up, the task was to lie still and remember my dreams. The theory is that dreams can be a window into our subconscious, a space where our minds process information and desires without the filter of our waking ego. They can sometimes communicate messages and solutions our conscious mind isn't ready to accept. Day 1 was a complete disaster. My alarm jolted me awake, and by the time I remembered I was supposed to be still, any trace of a dream was gone. I literally wrote in my journal, "Woke up, remembered nothing, great start." But I stuck with it. On the night of day 2, before sleeping, I set a clear intention. I told myself, tonight I will remember my dreams and they will offer me insight. That simple act made a huge difference. When I woke up on day 3, I had this vivid, bizarre dream about navigating a library where all the books were blank. I didn't move. I just replayed it in my head, focusing on the feeling of frustration and curiosity, and wrote it down immediately. Throughout the week, this became a fascinating ritual. The dreams were rarely literal, but they were packed with symbolism. The act of writing them down, without judging them, felt like collecting clues. I didn't try to analyze them to death, I just let them be. And slowly, I started noticing themes that mirrored the anxieties I was facing in my real life. It was my first peek into a part of my mind that had been talking all along. I just hadn't been listening. This was the habit I was dreading the most. Quiet the mind sounds so simple, but my mind is basically a chaotic inner city of to-do lists, worries, and random 90s song lyrics. The goal was to spend at least 10 minutes every morning in meditation. Research consistently shows that meditation calms the mental noise, which makes it easier to hear the subtle voice of intuition. When your mind is all over the place, those intuitive signals get lost in the static. My first few attempts were humbling. I'd sit down, close my eyes, and my brain would immediately hit me with a highlight reel of every embarrassing thing I've ever done. Or I'd start writing an email in my head. I felt like I was failing miserably, but I remembered the point isn't to have thoughts, but to just observe them without getting carried away. So I tried a new approach. I imagined myself sitting on a riverbank, and each thought was a leaf floating by. I didn't have to jump in. I could just watch it go. Some days were a total logjam of leaves, but other days, I actually found moments of quiet. In those little pockets of stillness, something new appeared. It wasn't a booming voice of wisdom, it was a sense of calm, a physical sensation of my whole nervous system just downshifting. This practice taught me what mental quiet actually feels like in my body. It wasn't about getting answers meditation, but about tuning my mind so it could pick up the signals later. Right after my morning meditation, I'd grab my journal. This wasn't just for dreams, this was for a full-on brain dump. The idea is to get your conscious, overthinking mind out of the way and let deeper insights bubble up to the surface. It's really just a way to have an honest conversation with yourself and untangle all the knots in your head. At first, my entries were pretty surface level. I'm tired, so much to do today, worried about X. But as the week went on, I started asking myself direct questions in the journal. Things like, what does my intuition feel like? Or, what is the kindest next step I can take for myself? On day 4, I asked, what am I afraid of with this big decision? I just wrote and wrote without stopping or editing myself. The pen just moved, and what came out completely shocked me. The fear wasn't about making the wrong choice. The fear was about what would happen if I made the one. The fear was about success. That was a bombshell. My logical mind had never ever considered that. It was an insight that came not from thinking harder, but from creating a space for my subconscious to speak through the page. This journal became my sacred space to connect the dots and see my own patterns laid out in front of me. This habit felt like basic training for the main event. It's one thing to trust your gut on a life-changing decision, but how do you even know what that trust feels like? The practice was to start small. For the whole week on tiny, low-stakes decisions, I had to go with my very first gut feeling, no questions asked. This was surprisingly hard. My analytical brain wanted to jump in constantly. No, you had a salad yesterday, you should have a sandwich. But the other route is shorter. This other email is obviously more urgent. I had to literally tell my inner critic to take a hike. But what this habit revealed was amazing. It taught me how to tell the difference between a quick, pure instinct and a slow, heavy thought process. The instinct was a light, fast nudge. The overthinking felt convoluted and full of anxiety. By practicing on tiny decisions, I was building a muscle. I was creating a track record that proved following that nudge works out, which built the confidence I needed to trust it on bigger things. We all know exercise is good for us, but for this experiment, I came at it differently. Instead of a rigid workout schedule, I practiced intuitive exercise. Each day, I'd check in with my body and ask it, what kind of movement do you actually need today? This flips exercise from being a punishment or a chore into a form of self-care and a way to connect with your body's own wisdom. On Monday, my body felt heavy and exhausted. The idea of a high-intensity workout was awful. So I went for a long, slow walk in the woods instead. On Wednesday, I felt restless. So I put on some music and danced around my living room for 20 minutes. On Friday, I felt stiff. So I did a gentle yoga session. This completely changed my relationship with exercise. For maybe the first time ever, moving felt joyful and nourishing, not like another task to check off my list. It drove home the main theme of the week. Listening to what my body physically needed, not what my mind it should be doing. This practice reminded me that wisdom isn't just in your head. Our bodies have their own kind of intelligence. We're halfway through the 10 habits, and I was already feeling a real shift. The world felt less noisy, and my own head felt a little more familiar. If this is making sense to you, and if you've ever felt that disconnect from your own gut feeling, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. I'm also really curious, which of these habits so far sounds the most challenging or the most appealing to you? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one. Alright, let's get back to the final 5. This habit is so simple, but it is wildly effective. Several times a day, whenever I felt stress or confusion creeping in, I would stop for a few rounds of deep belly breathing. The science is solid. Deep breathing activates the part of your nervous system that tells you to rest and digest. It calms your stress response, cuts anxiety, and gets more oxygen to your brain, all of which lead to clearer thinking. I made a rule. Every time I sat down at my desk, before I even opened my laptop, I would do 1 minute of box breathing. Inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 4, exhale for 4, and hold for 4. On day 5, I got a really stressful email. My immediate reaction was a jolt of anxiety. My chest got tight. My thoughts started racing. The old me would have fired back a defensive, emotional reply. But the new me remembered the habit. I closed my eyes, pushed back from my desk, and did 3 minutes of deep breathing. The change was immediate. The frantic energy just fizzled out. The knot in my stomach loosened. When I opened my eyes, the email was still there, but my perspective on it had totally changed. I could see the situation clearly, without the fog of emotional reactivity. Breathwork became my emergency brake for overthinking. It's a tool I can use in real time to create a pocket of calm, where my more measured, wise self can take the lead. You are what you eat, and that goes for your mental clarity too. This habit wasn't about a strict diet, but about mindfully adding things that nourish the brain. For the experiment, I focused on two things: starting my day with a huge glass of water and having a daily brain-boosting tea or smoothie. I did a little research on ingredients known to support cognitive function, like ginkgo biloba, lion's mane mushroom, and gotu kola. I found a pre-made tea blend that had some of these and made a little ritual out of it each afternoon. Now, did I suddenly become a super genius after one cup of tea? Of course not. But this habit was about the intention. It was another act of self-care, a signal to my body and mind that I was on their team. It made me more mindful of everything else I was putting in my body. Was this food going to leave me feeling clear and energized, or sluggish and foggy? It was another question I started asking myself, listening for the intuitive answer instead of just following a craving. This habit expanded the idea of listening to your gut to include the very real gut, our second brain. Wisdom doesn't just come from within, it's also about expanding the landscape of your mind. The more you learn, the richer the soil from which your intuition can grow. The habit was to read for at least 15 minutes a day from an actual book, not social media, not news articles, that challenged me or opened my mind. I chose a book on a topic I knew almost nothing about: ancient philosophy. At first it felt like more thinking, which seemed to go against the goal of the week. But I quickly saw its value. Engaging with complex ideas sharpened my focus and concentration, skills that get worn down by constant digital distractions. More importantly, reading about how people throughout history have wrestled with the same big questions of life and purpose was incredibly grounding. It connected my personal struggle to a collective human wisdom. It gave me new frameworks for understanding my own situation. This habit taught me that intuition and intellect aren't enemies, they're partners. Your intellect gathers the data and reads the maps. Your intuition then points the way, telling you which path to take. This habit was really about tying the others together to set the tone for the entire day. Waking up just 15 minutes earlier than I had to created this incredible sense of calm and control. My morning routine became a sacred, non-negotiable sequence. It went like this: wake up, lie still and remember my dreams. Drink a glass of water, meditate for 10 minutes, journal for 10 minutes. Then, and only then, would I let the outside world in. This routine created a buffer zone between my inner world and the outer world's demands. Before the emails and notifications could rush in, I had already anchored myself in my own presence. It was an act of prioritizing my own clarity above everything else. By day 6, this routine felt less like a list of chores and more like a lifeline. I started my days feeling centered and grounded instead of reactive and rushed. It was a daily declaration that my inner peace was the most important meeting on my schedule. In our hyper-connected world, our attention is constantly being pulled outwards. This final habit was about intentionally creating space by pulling it back in. The rule: at least 1 hour of completely screen-free time each evening before bed. No phone, no laptop, no TV. The first night was awkward. I felt fidgety, even bored. I kept feeling the phantom urge to check my phone for notifications that weren't there. It was a jarring reminder of how deeply wired that digital distraction had become. But by the third night, something changed. I rediscovered the quiet pleasure of just. I listened to music. I tidied up my apartment. I just sat and watched the sky change color. My mind, finally free from the constant assault of information, began to unwind. This digital detox was critical. It created the silence needed to actually process the day and hear the quieter whispers of my own thoughts. It was in this quiet space that the dots from the day would connect. An insight from my morning journal would suddenly click with something I read, all because my brain finally had the bandwidth. This proved to be one of the most important habits. You can't hear your inner wisdom if the outer world is always shouting. If you are enjoying this video, please hit that like button and subscribe. Be sure to leave a comment if you found this video enjoyable. Thanks. So, after 7 days of this, what actually changed? The biggest shift wasn't that I suddenly had a magic 8-ball in my gut giving me definitive answers. It was much deeper than that. The real change was in my relationship with myself. The constant static of anxiety and second-guessing was turned way down, and in its place was a quiet, steady confidence. I learned what my intuition physically feels like. For me, it's not a loud voice. It's a feeling of calm expansion in my chest when something is right, and a subtle, tightening feeling in my stomach when something is off. The daily habits, The breathing, the exercise, the check-ins, all trained me to notice these physical cues. And that big life decision I was facing? On the evening of day 7, during my hour of tech-free silence, the answer just came. It wasn't a lightning bolt. It just settled over me like a calm blanket. When I thought about one path, my body felt tight and anxious. When I thought about the other path, the one my logical mind had more problems with, I felt that sense of calm expansion in my chest. It was a quiet, solid knowing. It wasn't the loudest voice in the room, but after a week of practice, it was the clearest. For the first time in a very long time, I made a huge decision without torturing myself over it. I just trusted that feeling, and an incredible sense of peace washed over me. This one-week experiment ended up being more than a simple challenge. It was the start of a new way of living. I don't do all 10 habits perfectly every single day now, but they've become my toolkit. When I feel that old sense of disconnection creeping in, I know I can turn to my journal, my breath, or a quiet walk to find my way back to myself. The biggest lesson I learned is that tapping into your wisdom isn't a one-time event. It's a daily practice of creating space, listening deeply, and building trust with the most important guide you'll ever have, yourself. Your intuition isn't broken, it's just been patiently waiting for you to quiet down enough to hear it. If you're feeling lost or disconnected, I really invite you to try this. You don't have to do all 10 habits at once, just pick one. Pick the one that calls to you, or maybe even the one that scares you the most. Try it for a week. See what happens when you start listening to the wisdom that's already inside you. Thanks so much for joining me today. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to leave a comment. I love hearing your thoughts and tips. And if you haven't already, be sure to subscribe to Senior Wellness Daily so you never miss a new video. Together, we're building a healthier, happier life after 60. See you in the next one.